Do you ever freeze up when responsibility shows up? Do you ever rehearse freedom in theory, but then when the rubber meets the road, you are a little bit apprehensive? I just want to point out something that's going to happen in Deuteronomy chapter 1. We'll hear Moses recap the wilderness story. He'll reclaim Israel's story, right? He'll reissue the commandments for life in the land. And all of this is meant to show something, that memory without leadership actually makes people revert back to fear. And if you listen closely, I'll give you one immediate action so that you can turn memory into courageous obedience. In this episode of Biblical Unlocks, the show is designed to help build your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. If you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Now, let's get a little bit of context into Deuteronomy chapter 1. Okay, Deuteronomy chapter 1. We're about to finish the entire Pentateuch. So the Pentateuch are the first 5 books of the Bible, which is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and now Deuteronomy. And this chapter is the opening of Moses' first speech to the new generation. He's going to recount the Exodus and the route from Horeb onward. He's going to remind the people of God's command to occupy the land. He's going to explain his appointment of leaders. He's going to retell the failed spy missions at Kadesh and the people's refusal, and record God's judgment that barred that generation from entering the land. And the speech is actually going to reframe past events as theological lessons for present obedience under Moses' leadership. And Moses is going to appear throughout as the spokesperson and guide in Deuteronomy chapter 1. Okay, so I want to read verses 1 to 8 now. The introduction here, or the focus here, is going to be an introduction and reminder of God's command to enter the land. And my question for you to stay engaged is, why is Moses starting by recalling God's command rather than giving new laws? Okay, let's read verses 1 to 8. Verse 1. These are the words that Moses spoke to all Israel beyond the Jordan in the wilderness on the plain opposite Suf, between Paran and Tophel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Di-Zahab. Verse 2. By the way of Mount Seir, it takes 11 days to reach Kadesh Barnea from Horeb. Verse 3. In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, Moses spoke to the Israelites just as the Lord had commanded him to speak to them. This was after he had defeated King Sihon of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon, and King Og of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth in Edrei, beyond the Jordan in the land of Moab. Moses undertook to expound this law as follows. Verse 6. The Lord our God spoke to us at Horeb, saying, You have stayed long enough at this mountain. Resume your journey and go into the hill country of the Amorites, as well as into the neighboring regions, the Arabah, the hill country, the Shephelah, the Negeb, and the sea coast, the land of the Canaanites and the Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. See, I have set the land before you. Go in and take possession of the land that the Lord swore to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give to them and to their descendants after them. Alright, so biblical unlock number 1. Why does Moses start by reminding Israel of the command to enter Canaan? The answer to this question is basically because memory always reorients one's identity. Moses begins by reminding them who they are and who sent them. Obedience flows from a recalled story, not just fresh motivation. And it's an important reminder because it anchors the present in God's past faithfulness. So obedience is rooted not in duty, but in trust. Okay, we're going to read verses 9 to 18 now. Moses is going to appoint judges and leaders to help govern the people. And my engagement question for you is, why do we need to delegate authority? What problem is Moses trying to solve for the congregation by appointing these judges and leaders? Okay, verse 9. At that time I said to you, I am unable by myself to bear you. The Lord your God has multiplied you, so that today you are as numerous as the stars of heaven. May the Lord, the God of your ancestors, increase you 1,000 times more, and bless you as he has promised you. But how can I bear the heavy burden of your disputes all by myself? Choose for each of your tribes individuals who are wise, discerning, and reputable, and I will make them your leaders. You answered me, The plan you have proposed is a good one. So I took the leaders of your tribes, wise and reputable individuals, and installed them as leaders over you, commanders of thousands, commanders of hundreds, commanders of 50s, commanders of 10s, and officials throughout your tribes. I charged your judges at that time, give the members of your community a fair hearing, and judge rightly between one person and another, whether kin or resident alien. You must not be partial in judging. Hear out the small and the great alike. You shall not be intimidated by anyone, for the judgment is God's. Any case that is too hard for you, bring to me, and I will hear it. So I charged you at that time with all the things that you should do. Alright, biblical unlock number 2. Why set up judges? Can't Moses just decide everything? Well, the important thing to recognize, and this is exactly what Moses says here, is that practical governance, if you want to govern a people in a practical way, and if you want to form people in a moral way, you need to distribute responsibility. If only one person is capable of wielding authority, you are setting up yourself for disaster, because when that person goes, you're not going to have anyone else who can adequately carry out this sort of equal justice and equal responsibility. So, by appointing capable, God-fearing judges, Moses is actually preventing burnout, and it actually ensures quicker justice. It trains leaders so that the people don't collapse under centralized pressure, and the community learns self-governance under God's law. Okay, now we're going to read verses 19 to 33. This is going to be the sending of the spies, the people's panic at Kadesh, and God's response. So, the question for you to stay engaged here is, why did Israel refuse to trust God despite his past deliverances? Verse 19, Then just as the Lord our God had ordered us, we set out from Horeb, and we went through all that great and terrible wilderness that you saw, on the way to the hill country of the Amorites, until we reached Kadesh Barnea. I said to you, you have reached the hill country of the Amorites, which the Lord our God is giving us. See, the Lord your God has given the land to you. Go up, take possession as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has promised you. Do not fear or be dismayed. All of you came to me and said, let us send men ahead of us to explore the land for us and bring back a report to us regarding the route by which we should go up, and the cities we will come to. The plan seemed good to me, and I selected 12 of you, one from each tribe. They set out and went up into the hill country, and when they reached the Wadi Eshol, they spied it out, and gathered some of the land's produce, which they brought down to us. They brought back a report to us and said, it is a good land that the Lord our God is giving us. But you were unwilling to go up. You rebelled against the command of the Lord your God. You grumbled in your tents and said, it is because the Lord hates us that he has brought us out of the land of Egypt, to hand us over to the Amorites to destroy us. Where are we headed? Our kindred have made our hearts melt by reporting. The people are stronger and taller than we. The cities are large and fortified up to heaven. We actually saw there the offspring of Anakim. I said to you, have no dread or fear of them. The Lord your God who goes before you is the one who will fight for you, just as he did for you in Egypt before your very eyes, and in the wilderness where you saw how the Lord your God carried you, just as one carries a child, all the way that you traveled until you reached this place. But in spite of this, you have no trust in the Lord your God, who goes before you on the way to seek out a place for you to camp, in fire by night and in the cloud by day, to show you the route you should take. Okay, biblical unlock number 3. How did a people who saw plagues and parted seas, how could they fall into panic? The truth is, memory can dull and fear can leap. The story actually shows, because Moses recaps basically everything, if you think about it, right? He's recounting the Exodus story, he's counting the spies that we talked about in Numbers chapter 13, he's recapping everything, and he's showing us something, an important thing, that the story shows how physical hardship, right, distorted perception of threats, and a refusal to trust God's promise can actually produce spiritual paralysis. And his recap actually exposes how unbelief works, so that the next generation, and the generation after that, and the generation after that, and all the way up till us, can name and resist the same pattern. Don't let fear trump God, or you might have to put your fear in a little idol and start worshipping it instead of Jesus. Okay, let's read verses 34 to 46 now. the penalty for Israel's rebellion. So these are the consequences, the oldest generation's punishment and the path forward. And you might be thinking, well, what's the point of recounting judgment? Shame, deterrence, or pastoral warning? What is the point of it? Well, that's what we're going to be seeing in the final section of the chapter. Verse 34, when the Lord heard your words, he was wrathful and saw, not one of this evil generation shall see the good land that I swore to give to your ancestors, except Caleb, son of Jephunneh. He shall see it, and to him and to his descendants I will give the land on which he set foot, because of his complete fidelity to the Lord. Even with me, the Lord was angry on your account, saying, you shall not enter there. Joshua son of Nun, your assistant, shall enter there. Encourage him, for he is the one who shall secure Israel's possession of it. And for your little ones, who you thought would become plunder, your children who today do not yet know right from wrong, they shall enter there. To them I will give it. They shall take possession of it. But as for you, journey back into the wilderness, into the direction of the Red Sea. You answered me, we have sinned against the Lord. We are ready to go up and fight, just as the Lord our God commanded us. So all of you strapped on your battle gear and thought it easy to go up into the hill country. The Lord said to me, say to them, do not go up and do not fight, for I am not in the midst of you. Otherwise you will be defeated by your enemies. Although I told you, you would not listen. You rebelled against the command of the Lord and presumptuously went up into the hill country. The Amorites who lived in that hill country then came out against you and chased you as bees do. They beat you down in Seir as far as Hormah. When you returned and wept before the Lord would neither heed your voice nor pay you any attention. Okay, biblical unlock number 4. Does recounting God's punishment shame people or form them? Both, but it's primarily formation, because this narrative warns us of the covenant promises which carry conditions. Refusal to trust has communal consequences, and Moses recounts judgment not to gloat, but to teach that God's just holiness shapes covenant life, and that the new generation must choose differently. I just want to point out something as well, because this is important. We see that Moses says, I'm not even allowed to enter the promised land. And we see that this was the case in Numbers chapter 20, verse 12. Even with me, the Lord was angry in your account, saying, you shall not enter there, right? So even Moses is not allowed to enter there. So he's not removing a responsibility from himself, but rather having the humility to say, well, okay, I was also untrustworthy. I didn't trust the Lord. Only Caleb and Joshua son of Nun had the fidelity necessary to enter the promised land. So you can't be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You have to be fully trusting in God's path. And Moses recounts judgment, again, not to gloat, but to teach that God's just holiness shapes covenant life, and that the new generation must choose differently. There is a test, there is a choice that we have to make. We can either trust our feelings or we can trust in God. The choice is ultimately yours. Let's see how this chapter fulfills Jesus Christ. Okay, so Moses' speech reframes national memory into a summons to faithful action. That is Christ. In Christ, the pilgrimage account finds its true fulfillment. Jesus re-anchors God's people not merely in a national land, but in the promised rest and kingdom inaugurated in Him. He gathers people formed by remembered deliverance and leads them into obedient life under God's reign. The church leans from Moses how memory, leadership, and discipling structures must work together, so faith becomes durable and not just a nostalgic exercise, right? And we read in Hebrews chapter 4 verse 9 to 10 that, so then a Sabbath rest still remains for the people of God, for those who enter God's rest also rest from their labors as God did from His, right? And the promise here is that we will be able to rest. We will be able to trust in God in the way we tell our own story, right? Rather than to repeat the mistakes of the past. Because in verse 11 we read, let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one may fall through such disobedience as theirs. This is our ultimate goal. The promised land is the promised rest that God and Jesus Christ gives for us. Okay, some quick practical applications. It's important to, again, remember, right? Write down 2 formative moments that God has helped you, has delivered you from your life, in your life, right? And it's important to share this as well. You can share this with one friend and name one way that memory should shape your choices this week. And the second thing is, it's a leadership check. If you lead a group, you need to list one task that you're doing that could be delegated. Remember how Moses actually distributed that level of authority to other people. The same way you should distribute your authority, your leadership in such so that you aren't burnt out and that other people can form that leadership discipline. Alright, well that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocked. We learned in this episode that Moses opens by rude commands in remembered deliverance, and that obedience is a response to God's prior acts. We learned that recounting judgment functions pastorally. It disciplines present communities by teaching consequences and urging trust. And practically, memory and leadership and structured accountability are the ingredients for a pilgrim people who actually enter God's rest. Next time we're going to continue the journey in Deuteronomy chapter 2. We're going to follow Israel's travels around Edom and learn what faithful, boundary-respecting, and patient trust looks like on the way to the Promised Land. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to rate the show and follow. It's free, it helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.